Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, Dr. Andrea Letamendi. Hello, Andrea.
Hi, Brian. How's it going?
It's going very well. As of right now, we are 1 week away from being at San Diego Comic-Con 2015. You excited about that?
I am
anxious about that.
Anxiety.
Yeah.
Lots to do before we head down there, but certainly once we get there, it will be very exciting. We've got a number of panels. We have a meet and greet. We have a blogger meetup. So lots of stuff going on. So should be fun.
Yeah, go ahead and you've got, I think, just shy of, 100 panels this year?
Just shy.
Something along those lines. You've got 5 panels this year. I've got one with you, which I'm very excited about. But go ahead and for the folks at home and who plan on being in San Diego next week, please go ahead and let everybody know where we can find you.
Sure. So the first panel I'll be on is on Thursday of San Diego Comic-Con. It's called The Science of Science Fiction. It's Thursday evening at 8 o'clock. You know what? I'll post all of this information on underthemaskonline.com. So all the times, the panel rooms, the full panel description and the other presenters will be on there. But very briefly, The Science of Science Fiction will be about representing accurate science in science fiction TV shows and films, and there are a couple of psychologists on the panel as well as a couple of writers, and we'll be talking about the importance of those written narratives and why audiences should be knowledgeable about what is accurate versus what is not accurate science.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when they get it right, when they get it wrong, when it's important to get it right, and when it's not necessarily important to get it absolutely right.
Right. So that is Thursday night. On Friday, there are a couple of panels I'm on. The first one is in the morning. It's Push Boundaries Forward, Gender Diversity and Representation in Comics. It will be, as I said, at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I will be joined by a couple of comic book writers and some folks from Boom Comics to talk about the next kind of new indie wave of comic books and the just kind of the importance of inclusion and diversity in those storytelling.
And Push Comics Forward, that was from Boom Comics, right? That was the social media initiative they were doing, the hashtag
yes.
to push comics forward, not necessarily about Boom Comics. It was about all of comics and really all of life in general, how we could move forward and progress. It was a very good message, and I'm glad that there's a panel on it.
Yeah, it should be very exciting. And then that evening, I'll be on a panel that's more specific. It's about representation, but it's more specific to gender. It's called Building the Modern Superheroine, and I'm super excited to be on that one because we'll be talking specifically about the importance of female characters in comic books, TV shows, films, other narratives, and how we can kind of, how creators can build and design and tell stories about women who are dimensional and realistic and inspirational, and how, as a psychologist, I'll be talking about the importance of that kind of representation and how it has an impact on audiences and readers.
And there are some really big names on that panel.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be joined by Jose Molina, who's writer on Agent Carter, Babs Tarr, who draws for Batgirl, Cecil Castellucci, who writes science fiction, Sarah Kuhn, who writes young adult fiction, and Amy Ratcliffe, who writes for Star Wars Online.
Very cool.
So if you can't make any of those panels, join me on Saturday. That's where I'll be focused on more I guess, psychology related stuff. I will be on why comics are good for mental health and mental health is good for comics. That's a panel on Saturday morning at 11 o'clock. I'm joined by a couple of other psychiatrists, psychologists, and Gail Simone, who, of course, wrote for Batgirl, currently writes for Red Sonja, and we'll be talking about the impact of mental health narratives in comic books, and essentially how to kind of shape public opinion and have a basic discussion about that importance of mental health accuracy and destigmatization of mental health issues in the media.
That's going to be a really good panel.
Excited for that one. And then I guess I'll go to the panel we're on together that evening, Saturday at 7:30. It's the psychology of Star Trek versus Star Wars.
Again, it's episode 5, our 5th iteration of this particular panel.
Yeah, so you want to say something about that?
Only that I'm very excited about it. This year, instead of having you and Dr. Ali Matu squaring off about the psychology of Star Trek versus Star Wars, we will also have our traditional one co-panelist each. But then this year, we're going to do something special, and we are going to have a second co-panelist for each side. This year we are doing for Team Star Trek, it's Dr. Ali Matu from Super Fantastic Nerd Hour, and he's got a couple of other projects that are really big. Definitely you should look him up. Then we've also got Robert Meyer Burnett, who is the co-writer and director of Free Enterprise. If you're a Star Trek fan, you certainly know that movie. And he's also directing the big funded fan feature Star Trek Axanar right now. So we're all very excited to have him there. And then we've also got Love and Capes and long distance creator Tom Zoller. Tom was my co-host on the other podcast, Comics Assembled, for a while. So
the podcast that shall not be mentioned.
That's right. The one that I just mentioned that shall not be mentioned. Yeah, Tom is really great. He's probably one of the biggest Star Trek fans I have ever met. In fact, the two of us can't have a single conversation, whether it's in person or via text, without immediately just going and spiraling off into Star Trek quotes. So that is Team Trek. Team Wars, of course, will be yourself. And joining you will be Full of Sith's Concetta Parker. She's also does a lot of the PR work for Steve Sansweet and Rancho Obi-Wan. She is one of the biggest Star Wars fans we could possibly know, and it's going to be an absolute pleasure to have her on. But then we'll also have Amy Ratcliffe, who's a writer for Star Wars Insider. She's also a geek journalist for IGN and Nerdist, and she does a lot of really good work. And she is also an immense Star Wars fan. In fact, you have a Imperial Cog tattoo, and Amy has a Rebel Alliance tattoo.
She does.
And the two of you can often be seen in photos posing, squaring off against one another with your allegiances.
We do.
So that one's going to be awesome. That one's 7:30 Saturday night. It's going to be a lot of fun. We say versus, but really that's more to get butts into seats. This one is usually standing room only, but we have a lot of fun going head to head against one another. We all love both franchises, but this is our opportunity to just really dish it out, psychologically speaking.
Right. So check it out. That is Saturday night. If you can't make any of those panels and you want to chat with us, especially about, I don't know, the Arkham Sessions, we have an Arkham Sessions meet and greet event scheduled for Sunday at 11 o'clock. If folks come, I invite them to bring some coffee and other uppers, because I'm sure Sunday morning of Comic-Con, we are going to be completely exhausted.
Well, it's the morning after our Star Trek versus Star Wars panel, so we are going to be, probably our heads are going to be hurting and needing coffee the next morning.
But it should be fun. I'm excited to talk to fans and listeners. It's again, that one is at 11 o'clock on Sunday. I'm going to say where this one is, because this is important.
Absolutely.
This one is in the Small Press Pavilion, table O04.
That is O04. 604.
Right. And we'll be there for about an hour, maybe an hour and a half if we can convince Brian to stick around
Maybe
for that long. And we invite people to come and chat with us, ask us questions about the podcast, ask us questions about Batman and psychology, and there will be a recording mini studio set up for folks to actually record their questions, which we will address on an upcoming episode.
Yeah, that's going to be really awesome. Right after Comic-Con, we are going to put together those questions that you have, not only necessarily about Batman the Animated Series, but certainly we absolutely welcome those, but maybe Batman in general. Any kinds of Batman or Batman's Rogues Gallery questions you might have, particularly for Drea. We definitely want you to come by the booth throughout the week, set up we will ask you those questions into a mic, and then when we get back to our home studio, we will answer those questions on an episode of the Arkham Sessions right after Comic-Con. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, I want to thank Fanboy Comics for collaborating with us and for hosting us and setting up this time to chat with some of our listeners.
This week, I suppose, we should probably pick up where we left off with our heroes. Ra's al Ghul was holding his own daughter, Talia, above his head while laughing maniacally after having risen from the Lazarus Pit. And it pretty much seems like it's all downhill from there, right? It is an action-packed episode. This is The Demon's Quest Part 2, written by your good friend and mine, Mr. Len Wein. And it's based off of the story by Denny O'Neil. And it's really great because we really get an opportunity to see what the Lazarus Pit does to someone. Last week, we ended with him nearly dying and being lowered into this vat of, Drea, I believe you called it the placenta pit.
The placenta pit.
And we have since learned that whatever is in this pit, it is boiling hot, it is nasty looking, and it has got amazing rejuvenating qualities.
Which is why I thought maybe we were discussing what could possibly be in the pit. What is this substance? Because the effects of essentially drowning in it or ingesting it through every orifice in your body, you are, like you said, not just rejuvenated, but you are smarter, stronger, just basically a superhuman. You're an elevated sense of yourself.
And if that includes an elevated sense of maybe aggression or what is it about the Lazarus Pit that drives him mad? Because he doesn't seem to have control of his own body. He has no agency. He has just lifted his daughter, whom he loves very much, above his head and is about to throw her in.
Right.
And we learn that while it will revive the dying, throwing a healthy body into the Lazarus Pit will absolutely kill them. So he's about to murder his own daughter, but he doesn't actually seem to be aware of it. It's more like sort of Hulk smash.
Right.
Sort of.
He's and I thought about this because I mentioned placenta possibly being, what is filling this pit, because we were talking about this last week. Some people ingest placenta because it has, ostensibly, it has these rejuvenating qualities. Now, personally, I have not experienced that, nor have I actually read any studies about that. It's more of people's reports, individual cases that say that ingesting placenta can be particularly rejuvenating. I almost liken the Lazarus Pit. If I were to think of this realistically, like the supernatural element aside, what could possibly get him into this state? Let's think about
the state of rejuvenation or the state of just madness.
The state immediately following the
so maniacal
the
laughter and maybe
right.
even superhuman strength for a
right.
period of time.
And dissociative effects, not knowing who he is, not knowing who Talia is, being a little bit kind of not just disconnected, but believing that he is a god or superhuman, almost like he has this temporary delusion. To me, because this is not a natural state in his own mind, this is something that is happening to him because he was in the Lazarus Pit. It's almost like a drug-induced state, with, of course, whatever's in the Lazarus Pit being that particular drug or substance.
Right.
So again, obviously, the Lazarus Pit is meant to be supernatural, but if we were to liken it to a realistic substance, I would probably say it's some kind of amphetamine or some kind of, some upper, some like speed, like some very strong amphetamine that would have similar effects than, the ones that we saw. Like, for instance, a heightened sense of strength, the perceived sense of strength, as well as actual increase in energy, a very severe change in mood, possible hallucination or delusion or kind of break from reality, not recognizing the people around them. So again, this would be a really, really high state of mind. I tried to look up, recently I was looking up what the side effects for amphetamines are, and we have some similar side effects, like hallucinations, a change in mood, a change in behavior, aggression, hostility, possible confusion, and erections that might last a long time.
Wow. There are people who will pay good money for that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So
this is essentially hot springs that you might find at a mountain spa or something, but it's boiling over with steroids or some sort of amphetamine or something that when it comes in contact with your skin, you are not only rejuvenated, but you are given this sense of euphoria and maybe even disconnected from yourself a little bit. That sort of thing, though, wouldn't necessarily... No, again, this is the science fiction element, the fantasy element of Batman, of course. But that sort of thing wouldn't necessarily legitimately rejuvenate you, right? It would just sort of give you that sense of, well, maybe that's what the Lazarus Pit's doing. I mean, we don't get the... obviously, he still is sick. He still is dying, and he just rejuvenates himself in the Lazarus Pit from time to time.
Right.
Maybe this boiling hot spring of steroids is essentially, maybe that sense of high, that those rejuvenative effects aren't necessarily permanent. They're
no. And we know he has to go back into the Lazarus Pit, right? It's almost like he has an addiction. Again, if we were to take the supernatural component out, he has an addiction to this substance, and the after effects, the side effects, whatever you want to call it, are temporary. So once he comes down from that, there's a withdrawal. He becomes weak. He gets tremors. He has blurred vision. He can't think straight. He's, physically incapable of doing things other people can do. So those symptoms that we see, especially in the first episode of Demon's Quest, is very similar to actual withdrawal from amphetamines and stimulants.
So, Drea, are you familiar with phencyclidine, otherwise known as PCP or angel dust?
Oh, well, I'm not that familiar. I don't have personal
You don't have
experience.
firsthand...
No, I do not.
Well, I ask about that one because it occurs to me that this was a big thing in the in the 80s, especially, where people were taking this drug, lacing various other drugs with it or doing whatever, and oftentimes people would report cases of having these bouts of feeling this euphoria that you talk about. They would also sometimes feel like they were extremely powerful, that maybe they had increased strength, and they would also have senses of invulnerability. And doctors were saying that it had a for lack of a better word, like a sort of a numbing effect on your brain, on your mind. So like if you were doing things like punching through a window, you wouldn't even feel that. You would never know that it happened. You could do any kinds of things and never know it. And some people who observed these acts would actually watch and see people doing these things that they thought seemed like they had increased strength as well.
Right. So it's not like they actually have more strength. It's that they are not experiencing the pain associated. It's like when Raj Al Ghul was lifting his daughter up over his head. I mean, it was a very dramatic scene, and it made it look like this was superhuman. But I'll bet he could probably lift his daughter up above his head. That is not a superhuman ability. But in this case, he was doing it so dramatically, and he was doing it violently with the intent to harm, that it became, this really kind of, it became a nightmare. It became this really scary scene. Yeah. And it had the impact that we all thought he was superhuman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't know how long these effects last, but I do know that that there have been a number of psychological effects that have been listed. In fact, some of them would seem very much like what Ra's al Ghul is going through. Like I said, the inducing feelings of strength, of power, and invulnerability. But then you've also got people would say that they had severe changes in body image or loss of ego boundaries, paranoia, depersonalization, and it alters mood states in a very unpredictable fashion. And so I'm not suggesting that he's basically swimming in a bubbling vat of PCP, but some of that sounds very much like what he is going through, and some of it, of course, doesn't. Actually, this brings me to a point. We were sent a tweet last week after this episode where I think a listener misunderstood what we were saying a little bit. You had been talking about Talia, and we were talking about borderline, and you were saying that borderline disorder sometimes requires the person who has the disorder to maybe have a poor self-image of themselves. Well, that's a little repetitive, but a poor self-image. And we then said, well, that's no one in the Al Ghul family. But I think someone actually misheard a little bit, because we want to make clear that we don't think Talia or Ra's have self-image problems. If anything else, it's the exact opposite. Ra's has a very high.
He is particularly narcissistic, mm-hmm. and she is. I mean, she definitely is very confident. Mm-hmm. Now, certainly, I would say, because of what we've seen her do in that previous episode, when she double-crossed Batman and was definitely lying and betraying him, there are elements of I guess we can call healthy, high mm-hmm. self-esteem, thinking very highly of herself. So no, I wouldn't say that either one of them have low self-esteem.
No. Yeah. I just wanted to make that very clear, that neither of us think that either member of the Al Ghul family, Ra's nor Talia, have self-image problems. In fact, I think maybe Ra's has a self-image problem in the other end of the spectrum, but we'll talk about that. Batman ends up saving Talia to a degree. He gets her away from Ra's, but Talia is very confident.
I can handle this myself.
She has seen this before, and she's able to save herself. She simply walks right up to her father and slaps him in the face, and suddenly he's cool with everything again, which is an interesting way to bring someone down off of that euphoric high of the Lazarus Pit.
Right. It was like she slapped him into reality. Mm-hmm. But it implies that she's done that many times before.
Yeah. He seems to not have been in his own mind necessarily. He seems to almost be in this, for lack of a better word, an out-of-body experience, because he's fully aware that Batman helped save his daughter, and he is just as thankful to Batman as he is to Talia for waking him up. What's interesting is this also gives Batman another opportunity to marry Ra's daughter.
The answer is still no.
No.
Well, it's not just to marry her, though. It's take my place and marry my daughter. Those are separate things.
I mean, yes. One would think maybe
Yes,
it's a little separate.
Those are separate things. But what do you think Batman is mostly against? Is it that he does not want to take his place, or is it that he's very much against marrying Talia?
You know, I think it could be a little of both. I think he is certainly against taking the place of Ra's al Ghul. I think in the last episode, Ra's al Ghul proved himself to be a straight-up villain. He is an eco-terrorist of the nth degree. You think Poison Ivy is bad. This guy really, casts a wide shadow over her. She is I don't think any of her plans have been quite as intense as Ra's al Ghul. And he has got this plan where he has got several Lazarus pits around the globe, and they each have a bomb hanging above them. They're all going to have these bombs dropped in, and at a certain time, they are all going to explode, and the world is essentially going to flood with whatever this Lazarus stuff is, and it's going to kill all of the healthy people it touches. Now, that being said, it'll probably revive all the sickly, dying people that it touches.
This is a humanitarian mission. It's very kind.
It's true. Ra's is very aware that the majority of the human population will cease to exist after this moment, but he's allowing the Earth to reclaim itself. And Batman sees that as a problem. And I guess if you were going to choose someone to take over for you to maintain your legacy, you may not choose the person who thinks you are just out of your mind. But that's what he's done.
I can see it clearly now for the first time. You are completely out of your mind.
Drea, this sounds like the perfect opportunity for you to step in, and let's talk about Ra's and his maybe being out of his mind.
I guess we would need to make sure out of your mind is defined here.
I don't know that Batman actually defined it, but I guess let's talk about these people who have these sort of maniacal ideas and these schemes that they are very much okay with eliminating the majority of the population of the world as long as the Earth or, any other cause they happen to be fighting for is emerging victorious. I mean, let's talk about a guy who is essentially a tyrant, who is we're legitimately talking about genocide here.
Well, I don't see him as much different than, say, Poison Ivy or Man-Bat, in that they are willing to go through great lengths to and even to sacrifice themselves to build this new world, the next world that they think they can design or they can be a huge part of. So it's that narcissistic element of, I know better for this entire planet, and I'll do everything I can to ensure that my plan, my mission is enacted. And that is, again, it's hugely narcissistic, but it also has this element. It has this, clearly this violent antisocial element that it's what makes them villains, right?
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that narcissism. Let's talk about that little spark of villainy. There's a moment where Ra's al Ghul has the opportunity to kill Batman, and he doesn't take it. Why?
I would prefer the detective live to witness the realization of my dream.
He wants Batman to witness the destruction of the Earth's population. And we all know that Batman is the great protector of the citizens of Gotham City specifically, but he is now going around the world in a very Indiana Jones style, dressed in that full Batman outfit, taking on thugs and trying to save the world. And now he has been captured and is potentially going to witness it. Talk about a villain who, you know, of course, we're dealing with a cartoon where the hero has to win. Of course, we're dealing with a comic book character. But let's talk about a villain who, in real life, decides not to kill the hero just so that hero can watch him succeed. You know, Raish succeed.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. This dynamic is interesting because I believe that Raish was serious when he said he wanted Batman to take over in his role or take over his role. So there's that element of, I will keep you alive to see, you know, to kind of torture you, to let you see your failure and to make you feel guilt and shame and regret for not, I guess, not agreeing to the plan or not taking on this offer. So it's a punishment, but I think it's also, it's very sadistic too. It's
oh, absolutely.
It's almost like he's sort of just toying around with him, keeping him alive so that he can torture him.
Well, I think it's rubbing it in a little bit. I think it's two master chess players, one of whom seems to have the other one's number at some point in time and just wants to rub it in the face of the other player. I think that Raish sees Batman as a worthy opponent. I think Raish may even see Batman to some degree as an equal, though we don't know that for a fact. He certainly has a very high level of respect for Batman, going so far as to, once they capture Batman, his men rip Batman's shirt off of him. You know, they want to make sure he's not hiding any further gadgets. They've already taken away his belt, they've taken away his cape, but they leave on the mask.
It is a mark of honor.
So Raish has an intense respect for the Batman. But it does seem like he's taking this opportunity to prove to Batman, and maybe even to himself, maybe he is gloating for the sole purpose of, I have defeated a man I see as being worthy of fighting me in the first place.
Right. It's very self-serving because he wants this near equal opponent slash potential mentee or student, and again there's that element of being a parental figure to some degree, but it's that need to then have him witness this. So it's complex, but I think that it has to do with that narcissism and with Raish
Al Ghul.
It has to do with Raish wanting to keep him alive to basically demonstrate to him just how powerful and effective and godlike he is. I mean, you can't be a god if you don't have somebody be witness to that.
Right. I think you're absolutely right. But I have a question. What then separates Ra's al Ghul from people like the Riddler? Someone who also thinks very highly of themselves, also believes that they are on par with, if not superior to, the Batman, who the Batman always seems to overcome through one thing or another. In the case of the Riddler, it's usually a case of he has almost sabotaged himself in some way. Batman has figured out some loophole in whatever his scheme is. How is Ra's al Ghul different from those kinds of villains?
Well, I think the Riddler is all about the mystery, the problem, the journey of taking Batman through that problem. Or series of problems, series of mysteries. It's not so much about the solution. It ends. With the Riddler, it really does end when the riddle is solved. But I think Rage is firmly interested in the end, in success.
Yeah.
He's not as interested in the journey getting there. And sure, we do see a hand-to-hand fight between them, and Batman he acquires a sword.
Oh, it is sword to sword, both of men bare-chested, and
it's quite the scene.
It is quite the scene. It's very Errol Flynn, and as they're climbing up and down Raish's desert stronghold. By the way, I noticed something that is absolutely fantastic about this episode. In fact, if it's on one of the soundtracks that's already been released, I have got to get a hold of it. Harvey Cohen did the music for this episode, and it couldn't sound more like a John Williams sort of, I don't want to say parody, because that suggests that it is in some way making fun of, but
inspired.
It is a straight up send up to John Williams and his Indiana Jones scores. It's all very. I mean, there were moments during this episode, in particular, where I felt like I was watching maybe Indiana Jones the animated series, where the music, it felt like certain scenes in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it felt like and even the writing to a degree. I mean, when Batman takes over one of the guards on the camel, and he takes his outfit and he rides into Raish's stronghold, and then you see him ducking into various places, areas where he's not supposed to be. It felt like Indiana Jones, and I couldn't have applauded that score more, because I think that really, really helped illustrate this whole swashbuckling persona that is going on. And then, of course, the scene at the end, they're both bare-chested, they're both fighting to the death with the swords. It was an amazing moment. I really enjoyed that part of the episode. So let's talk a little bit about the fact that Raish becomes, in that moment, okay with perishing alongside Batman. The two of them are working their way up to the Lazarus Pit area, and in order to ensure that Batman doesn't stop the bomb from going off, Raish is okay with dying.
It appears that we will both perish together, Detective.
So now we've got a guy who not only wants Batman to witness Ra's al Ghul winning, we now see Ra's al Ghul being okay with dying alongside of him, as long as it means that Batman doesn't win.
Right. So it's almost, it's not a facade. He truly, this mission of his is authentic. He's willing to die for it.
Absolutely.
And now one can even wonder, is this a delusion? Is he now holding this very complex delusion that this is the he and only he is responsible for the next iteration of the planet?
Let's talk about that, because that brings me to my next question. Drea, I want to know your thoughts on the similarities between Ra's al Ghul and Batman. They both have missions that they believe they're the ones meant to enact. They're the ones who are meant to succeed. Batman, it's taking over Gotham City, removing the criminal element. In the case of Ra's al Ghul, it's taking over the world, ridding the world of the element of human beings who are destroying it. And the two of them are both insanely intelligent. And I use the word insanely, maybe even appropriately, I'm not sure. But the two of them are so on par with one another, but they seem to be coming from opposite ends of the spectrum and colliding there in the center. Drea, what is your take on these two guys and their similarities, or maybe their differences? What separates Batman from becoming Ra's al Ghul?
Well, the moment that differentiates them is when Batman tells him, "You're out of your mind." he recognizes, I mean, insight is a huge deal. He recognizes that this mission to sacrifice so many human beings and to have hope and to have this faith in something that's grounded in this delusion, that to Batman is the definition of insanity. That to him is you're completely, you are broken from reality. You have no understanding of what reality is. So there, I think, is the true comparison where, yes, Batman has his own mission. And yes, it can sometimes be unrealistic, but I would never say that it was delusional. I would never say that it was indicative that he is having a break from reality, that he's in this delusional state. I think that he is certainly overly determined, certainly very self-sacrificing, and in many times makes poor decisions, as we've talked about many times on the show, like not seeing if Robin's around to help him, and he, goes on this mission as he's completely blind.
Yeah, because at the very least, Ra's al Ghul on the other end of the spectrum is willing to use Talia as his assistant in these cases. In this episode, Batman has come to rescue Robin, and he does so, and Robin doesn't do anything
Where
for the
did
rest
Robin
of the
go?
episode. He's hanging
saved
out.
him.
He's hanging out in the. He's like in the plane or whatever. Like at the end, he comes and helps Batman. Like the two of them go off together. But Robin is completely useless for the rest of this episode. Talia, on the other hand, she's been instrumental in this plan from the beginning. In fact, Talia at the end of the episode says,
You must understand, beloved. I share my father's vision and seek the same ends, but I do not choose his means to those ends.
she doesn't agree that humanity has to fall in order for the earth to rise. And that is the difference between Talia al Ghul and her father. Talia, we should mention, kisses Batman at one point and slips him a lockpick. So she even witnesses, or she can see the error in her father's ways, and is basically setting him up to fail at this point. One might even say that, well, I have no doubt that Len Wein would have come up with a way for Batman to escape had he needed to. It's really Talia that helps Batman win the day in the end.
Right.
So what do we think about Talia? Last week we were unsure. Last week she was the victim up until the end when we realized she was actually part of the scheme. She had supposedly fallen in love with Batman after only having spent a couple hours with him, though we have no idea how long she is obsessed over him since then.
Right.
He has basically become a teen idol, maybe, for her. Maybe she's got some of the Batman merch on her wall.
I think she's purchased many a bobblehead.
Yeah, she's
Batman.
very upset when Ra's says that he's going to destroy their home.
There is nothing here that cannot be found in our desert stronghold.
Maybe what she's really upset about is the poster of Batman that is hanging
it's
out.
her Batman collection.
She's like, no, you don't know what I have back there. So let's talk about where we see her in this episode.
I think she's certainly more dimensional, like she explains it that she has the same beliefs and the same faith that her father does. And she's seen the mystical powers of the Lazarus Pit. And she probably has a bond with her father that's so strong that she's willing to go with him 90% of the time or 90% of the way. But she explains that she doesn't agree with his methods, that clearly to her, the destruction of humanity, the destruction of human lives, as I guess double-crossing and conniving as we can see her, as we've seen her in the past, she's not one to murder.
Right. In fairness, the double cross was basically at the order of her own father.
Right.
So it isn't even necessarily her decision to double cross Batman so much as, once again, her father is. So she is, for lack of a better word, a servant to her father.
Right. And who wouldn't be? I mean, we can almost to some degree, look at it like she could be a victim here. She could be essentially controlled by him because he, as we've seen, especially after Lazarus Pit sessions,
Right.
he can be very violent, and he could threaten her life. And so it could be to her benefit that she just aligns with him and follows his orders and in fact does as he does, as father does.
Well, in this particular case, she was playing the victim, the kidnapped victim in the first episode. We see a photo of her, and I get the sense that this entire thing really benefits her as much as it benefited her father, in that she could potentially walk out of this situation with a new, strong, dark knight husband. But aside from that, I don't know that she necessarily would have gone to these means in order to achieve the ultimate task. And you know, she says so at the end. But it is still a little, you know, I'm not the doctor, so I'm allowed to use incorrect terms. Like, it's a little crazy for her to set this up just to have Batman hang out. And for all we know, this whole thing was in order to save Batman. Because if he had blown up the Lazarus Pits the way that he wanted to, Batman inevitably would have been caught in the flood.
Right.
And as a
right.
healthy man, he would have been killed, and you know, can't have that. Batman, of course, saves the day. He throws the sword. He angles himself in such a way that he has the high ground. He throws the sword down. It shatters the satellite that's going to link all of the Lazarus Pit bombs, and none of them are able to go off. This infuriates Ra's al Ghul. In fact, in a brief moment of lost composure, he charges Batman, falls over the edge, is holding onto a sword, and actually gives up his own life.
Victory is yours, detective. Perhaps it is time I am finally one with the planet I so love.
And he falls into the Lazarus Pit. We know that it kills healthy people, or does it?
Is he actually healthy?
That's an excellent question.
Could the Lazarus Pit ever really kill him? Because he's just infused with it. Like the Lazarus Pit, whatever is made of the Lazarus Pit is basically in his blood. So I can't imagine that it will actually kill him.
Yeah, so this is the moment in most episodes where the villain is carted off to Arkham Asylum or whatever prison they're holding the criminals in Gotham City, but they're not in Gotham City. And Talia asks,
What's to become of me then? Am I to be your prisoner?
what is Batman's response in this moment? It's very un-Batman-like. He brings her in, and almost like a bodice ripper Harlequin novel cover, he is shirtless, wearing the mask, and there in the setting sun, he kisses her very intensely.
It's very unlike him.
It is very unlike him.
But these two episodes are almost a little bit like a mini movie, an Indiana Jones
Do you think
adventure.
all that adrenaline? Do you think all of that got the better of him? Do you think he feels like, I do feel a little like Fabio right now? I got to take this girl and I got to kiss her.
It could be that he's feeling out of his element. He could be. I mean, he just saved the world, so he could be feeling very proud of himself and deserving of a little bit of, affection. But interestingly, that's it. He walks away. He has this opportunity to be with her, and clearly there's mutual affection there. Clearly they're both into each other, but he walks away from her.
Right. Yeah.
He leaves her on the sand.
He does leave her on the sand. But maybe she has become his prisoner, a prisoner of his heart.
What? That's no.
I don't know, but it is a very cool way to leave the girl just standing there pining after you in some other country as you go back to Gotham City. She knows who you are. She knows where you live.
Right.
She could come by any time.
I mean, it could be that he knows that she will look for him, that she will eventually find him. And remember, he's not Bruce Wayne, or Bruce is not necessarily into women who are criminals, who break rules, who have a level of a tendency toward deception and betrayal, and like he's not into that. So I think that ultimately, while he's attracted to her and appreciative that she saved his life, and while he's entertaining the idea that he could be married to her, he walks away from it because ultimately he's not into her as an idea.
Yeah, so this is where I want to ask one of the questions that was sent in by our good listener, Leah. So Leah asks, in terms of romantic interests, Bruce has repeatedly had moments of both, I'm meant to stand alone, and maybe this can work out. Both of these are stopped only when some outside force affects the situation. You know, we've seen that with Selina saving him in Almost Gotham. We also see Talia's loyalty to her father's mission in Demon's Quest Parts 1 and 2, and of course Vertigo. That ultimately stops his whole train of thought. Regardless, Bruce begins going on this sort of internal conflict with himself about if he should have that kind of intimate relationship with anyone. I wonder if he really does he have that internal conflict? Does he think that a relationship with Talia al Ghul could work out the same way that maybe he hopes that a relationship with Selina Kyle could work out? And I want to tack this part on. Do you think he would mind if she showed up in the Batcave later? Like, do you think the same way that Ra's al Ghul appears in the Batcave, like she knows who he is, right, and she knows where he lives?
Oh, I think he wants her to show up there.
Yeah. Do you think? Yeah. Do you think
yes.
that would?
Yes, but not. But I mean, the struggle here is he. Now we've talked about this before. He doesn't think. We talked about this in Mask of the Phantasm. He doesn't think that he can be both Batman and be in a relationship, in a bonded, committed, romantic relationship in the long term. And it's because he's unable to be complex. He's unable to be a dimensional, responsible person with those kinds of responsibilities.
Right.
So I'll be more specific that he is very, he looks at these identities as being very rigid. So I'm Batman, and very few people know about my Batman role, and I must stick to the mission. And it's an issue of morality. It's an issue of dignity. It's an issue of all of these codes that I have to abide by. I cannot do that and then also be in a romantic relationship, with someone who is, who violates those moralities or those ethical codes, and B, who would somehow take me away from that responsibility.
So I have to ask, we hear that Talia says that she agrees with her father's mission, but not with the means to the end, which means she is willing to potentially do things much more on the up and up, as long as the outcome is that the world thrives once again. Is it possible that, and we've seen her be the action heroine alongside Batman, is it possible that she could just become a heroine alongside Batman? Could Batman have, I know we've discussed Batwoman and the Bat family before, but could Batman have a romantic interest that is also a superhero, just fighting for a different cause?
No, I mean, we wonder about his relationships that are not romantic in nature, but leave little room for that kind of connection, that kind of growth. And I'm talking specifically about Robin, that we have time and time again seen that there is an opportunity for Batman and Robin to bond, for Robin to spend more time with him, especially as another, caped vigilante. But there is a lot of I don't know, possessiveness or ownership or something where Batman
Sure.
doesn't really let him into that world.
But Robin is also different. There is no romantic interest
Clearly,
in Robin, or at least
clearly.
we don't think there is. But there is a romantic interest in Catwoman. There is a romantic interest in Talia al Ghul. Do you think that it would be possible? And let's go so far as to say Andrea Beaumont in Mask of the Phantasm. We have seen these women take on costumes, capes, cowls, the whole nine yards. They have fought on par with Batman. Do you think that if one of these women decided that they were going to fight for good, much like Selina has since her original conviction,
Right.
do you think that it's possible that if they decided to take on the role of costumed vigilante alongside Batman, that he could develop a relationship with one of those women? Like, do you think, because Robin is different, Robin is more like a son
Right.
sort of figure.
Well,
do
you
you
know-
think that he would enjoy that time?
No, I mean, I keep telling you no, because even though we're both agreeing that there's not a romantic relationship between Batman and Robin, what I'm saying is that there was the potential for them to bond over this incredibly similar mission. There was the potential for them to have an appropriate father-like, son-like relationship, and the person that isn't making that possible is Batman. And I see the same. I could carry that formula over to a romantic relationship.
Yes, I don't see a guy who's interested in having the father-son relationship, though. The Christmas with the Joker scene that we often bring up, where he just flat out refuses to watch It's a Wonderful Life with Dick. There are moments that he doesn't even show an interest in having that kind of relationship. Robin is his partner more than he is his ward. So in this case, we have seen that he has legitimate emotional interest in Selina Kyle and in Talia. So I don't know that I agree that he just wouldn't be interested in developing that bond. But
I don't necessarily know that he's not interested in it. I don't think that he has that sophisticated emotional capacity to share that space with them.
Oh, so what you're saying is he suffers from maybe social personality. Oh,
No, and you can't, and you don't even remember what it is. So no.
no. Antisocial personality disorder would totally
No.
keep him from wanting that. Oh, no?
No.
Oh, okay.
I think, and this is all at this point speculative.
Okay, so Drea, we brought this up earlier in the episode, and of course it was from last episode as well, that the Lazarus Pit was full of placenta. And at the risk of drawing this out further, our good listener Bernard O'Shea actually has a little to say about this. He sent us a link, and of course we knew that this sort of thing existed, but it was great to actually have someone send us a link to a BBC article all about a soccer player, a footballer, Arsenal striker Robin Van Persie. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm from America. We don't know this sport. He has flown to Serbia in the past for this novel form of treatment. Placenta fluid is to be dripped onto his injured ankle.
Wow.
And apparently there is a lot of reports of people rubbing this fluid on their ailments, and they're saying that he could be back. Now, I'm not entirely sure when this article. This was in 2009, so I don't know how much this worked, but they were saying that he could be back in as little as 4 weeks if the treatment worked. So this is the kind of thing that is happening around the world, especially in places like Serbia, very much like Raisha's own desert stronghold.
Wow.
So yeah, he says, it can't hurt, and if it helps, it helps. But a number of people recommended it to him, and they're saying that it's not known how placenta may help, and there is certainly a lot of research being done But they do say that without any doubt, it does have a very high nutritional content.
Right.
And, that in the animal kingdom, mothers routinely eat that placenta to help them recover from the exertion of birth. And then there are also anti-aging creams on the market that use sheep placenta cells. So this was an incredibly interesting article. And now I'm going to have to go back and see just how quickly this guy came back from this treatment and if it actually worked on his ankle. But
right.
I'm very interested in finding out more about these Lazarus pits filled with stuff.
I could have been accurate.
You could have been accurate. I've heard of treatments like this, but I didn't know that there was a famous person we could point to. So now I want to know.
There you go. Real life case. Real life Ghul.
Oh, yes. I'm going to say that this soccer player is a real life Ghul. I am very much excited about next week. Next week, we are going to see everyone at Comic-Con. We're going to take next week off in terms of the show, but when we come back, we will come back with a vengeance, answering your questions from San Diego Comic-Con International. Drea, are you excited?
I'm very excited. I'm looking forward to it. I look forward to meeting folks. And of course, I was joking on Twitter when I said, let's call this meet and greet Stump Drea to see if we can get some interesting questions, maybe ones that I could not answer in terms of psychological science and mental health. But hey, maybe I was half serious there.
Yeah, and I highly encourage it. I think that you should come and try to stump Drea. I'm not suggesting that you try to stump Drea. I'm suggesting you come and you have a good conversation about Batman and other comic book heroes with us. Don't get weirded out if you ask a question into the microphone at the booth and we don't answer it, because we're going to answer it later. So it's not going to be a one-sided conversation, we promise. But we are looking forward to meeting every single one of you. Drea, until we return, where can folks find you online?
I am at Arkham Asylum Doc on Twitter, and my website is underthemaskonline.com. If you click on the schedule, you can see all of the panel titles, times, and dates if you'd like to check it out during Comic-Con. So please come say hi.
Yes, please do. You can find me. I am you can find me. I am on Twitter. I am at bward028. You can find us both. We are at Arkham Sessions. You can also email us, as always, arkhamsessions@gmail.com. We highly recommend that you check out the good folks at fanboycomics.net for other fantastic podcasts, as well as all of the events they've got going on at Comic-Con next week. You can also follow them on Twitter. They are at Fanboy Comics, comics with an X. Until next time, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
And together we are
The Arkham Sessions.